Good evening.
Good evening.
I'd like to call our meeting to order and remind everybody that our next meeting, 2 weeks from this Monday, will be June 20th, and we'll have a guest speaker at that meeting also. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker just briefly. We have Lieutenant Colonel Greg Ellison here this evening. Thank you very much for coming. He's a candidate for the Congressional District, Louisiana Congressional District number 3. That's from Lafayette to Lake Charles and beyond. So we'll be hearing about his candidacy in just a few minutes. We're going to have our traditional prayer followed by Carol Baudouin's pledge, and then we'll have Carol Baudouin introduce our speaker. Mr. Al, if you'd come forward, please.
Since we just celebrated Memorial Day and today we're celebrating D-Day, we'd like to focus our thoughts this evening on our servicemen and veterans. Our Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for our veterans. We thank you for their willingness to risk all so that our nation might dwell in peace and safety. May they find the honor and recognition they deserve. In the name of your divine Son, we pray that you will heal the physical and psychological wounds some of these veterans have suffered. Bring peace to those who mourn the loss of comrades. We pray that our nation would learn to respect and acknowledge those who have served their country well. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, members, and thank you for being here, Colonel.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel Ellison graduated from West Point in 1975. Over his Army career, he served in every level of command from platoon through corps.
Carol, move the microphone over in front of you, please.
You couldn't hear, or is it too loud?
It's better now.
It's better that way?
You were speaking.
Wasn't loud enough, Carol.
Thank you.
It's better? Okay, good. Thank you, sir.
Not even close.
Not a problem. During the World War, Colonel Ellison commanded a battery of nuclear-capable artillery in Germany. Greg is a graduate of the Army's prestigious School of Advanced Military Studies. In 1987, Colonel Ellison wrote a noted thesis on the Iran-Iraq War. 3 years later, he was leading star and Legion of Merit. In addition, in his engineering degree from West Point, he earned 3 master's degrees while in the Army. Over the last 19 years, Greg has earned a living in all business in southern Louisiana, confounding Kitty Hawk Energy 2003. Colonel Ellison has been very active in community affairs, Acadiana Outreach Board Chair, AMIKids.org, home of Adjudicated Young Men, PTA President, ESA. Greg is married and his wife, Jenny, for 37 years, and they have grown children and 3 grandchildren. Greg, thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Carol, for that warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I've been looking forward to speaking to the concerned citizens, and I welcome your questions at the end. I once read somewhere that there are 3 B's in public speaking: be sincere, be brief, and be seated. So I'll attempt to comply. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel from the United States Army, and I do love military history. Perhaps one of the most decorated officers in our military history was Lieutenant General Chesty Puller. He served our country for over 40 years in uniform and led Marines in 19 different campaigns in some of the most critical battles of the 20th century. Besides his extraordinary leadership skills, he is known for his quick-witted encouragement in combat. He will long be remembered for telling his Marines in the midst of battle, "All right, the enemy's on my left, they're on my right, they're in my front, they're in my rear. This time they can't get away." Unfortunately, our country in Louisiana is surrounded by problems, lots of problems, and we can't get away. That's why in this upcoming election, we must elect strong leadership capable of standing up and making the tough decisions that will surely come. I was raised in South Louisiana. I graduated from Lafayette High School, and at the height of the Vietnam War, when I was just 17, I raised my hand and volunteered to join the United States Army. I was honored to graduate from West Point and serve our country for over 20 years in uniform. During the last days of the Cold War, when perhaps the Soviets and the Russians were at their most dangerous, the senior Army leadership selected me to be the chief of the War Plans branch for the biggest post in the United States Army, the 45,000 soldiers of Fort Hood, Texas. I worked for a 3-star, but it was my staff's and my responsibility to plan what might have been the last great battle for freedom on the North German plain. During Desert Shield and Desert Storm, I was assigned to a tank division, the 1st Cavalry Division, the 1st team. I was the operations officer for over 1,500 soldiers in the division artillery. My staff and I planned, participated, and supervised 9 artillery raids forward of friendly lines into Iraq, into Kuwait, to deceive Saddam as the true location of General Schwarzkopf's Hail Mary. Perhaps the most difficult thing that I ever had to do in my life occurred one day before the ground invasion. I looked at my young soldiers in the eyes. I'm only 19, most of them 19, 20, and 21 years old, and told them tomorrow night, without headlights, I would take you through an Iraqi minefield. We would march 100 miles across the desert, assemble on the far side, and attack to defeat Saddam's Republican Guards. I told them that the eyes of the world were upon them, that our colors never ran, and to make America proud, and that I would do everything in my power to get them home safely to their loved ones. In 1995, I got promoted early to lieutenant colonel. I was on the command list, but I looked at my wife one day and I said, you know, I want to raise my children in South Louisiana. I want them to know the Louisiana that I love. I want them to have roots here. So we took our name off the command list and we returned to Lafayette. And I co-founded Kitty Arca Energy in 2003, a small oil and gas company. And we have geologists that put their finger on the map and they say drill here. So in my second career, we've been creating jobs in the oil industry. The guys that do the land work, the guys that do the board roads, the gaugers, the pumpers, the drillers. So I know how to create jobs here in the oil and gas business. You know, every day since we announced in January, I get asked the same question every day. Are you crazy? You know, our local economy is slipping into recession. Our good friends and neighbors are being thrown out of work. Our career politicians in Washington just made a deal with an Iranian, which are evil empire, and allowing them to put 1 million barrels of crude oil today on the market. You know, throwing more and more good people out of work here in South Louisiana. ISIS is threatening, attacking, and killing Americans around the globe. And at the same time, our career politicians in Washington have gutted the United States Army. We're at the lowest levels since before World War II, and the world is getting dangerous, more dangerous all the time. Our national debt is out of control. We're borrowing money today to spend today for our children and grandchildren to repay for programs that won't exist. Our borders are porous. It's more difficult to fly on an airplane internal to the United States than it is to cross the border. We can't really vet the people that are coming in here. Trust me, from a war-torn area in Syria, you cannot vet a person to see if he's a legitimate or a threat to the United States. But I could go on, but a good friend of mine stopped me at this point and says, Greg, how are we going to fix this? So Carol, Frank, Tom, how are we going to fix this? You know, I looked at him and I said, I still believe that America's and Louisiana's best days are still lie ahead of us. To think otherwise is not who we are as American people. So we must move forward in that regard. And so the keys to repairing what is wrong with our country are simple, really, and they're within our grasp. They're our Constitution, the natural resources of this state and our country, and most importantly, the people of our country, and here tonight, the people in this room. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit, the people in this room. Most of you are my age, a little bit older. We didn't grow up with much, but we did possess a work ethic which was not dependent upon a government handout. We set goals, we worked hard, we saved, we raised our families, and in many cases, we took risks and started businesses. But this sense of American exceptionalism, which has propelled our success here in South Louisiana, is fading fast. And instead of that behavior being rewarded in Washington, it's being penalized. You know, and it's time for us, our generation, to stand up, to get off the sidelines, to get engaged, to restore our country to greatness. And that's why I appreciate you being here tonight, and that's why I'm running for Congress. And if you remember nothing else about what I said tonight, then I ask you please to remember this. When someone asks you who to vote for in November, please ask them, vote for the man with the gumption to stand up for our oil and gas business and to protect what is vital to our state. Please ask them to vote for the man with the grit to restore our military and to defend our homeland at all costs. And please ask them to vote for the man with the guts to stand up to anybody who dares challenge our Constitution and threatens the fabric of our freedom. Our campaign will not be easy, but we're up to the task. We're going to travel all over South Louisiana and visit people from every background and from every political party. And I think that we'll be able to identify with my sense of optimism our story and join us on the challenge to restore America and to put ourselves and our future generations on the path to prosperity. Now as the campaign unfolds, and I'm almost done, as the campaign unfolds, you'll meet people, my competitors, my opponents. They're all espouse a similar, probably conservative philosophy if you can get them to come. And but only one of them will be able to look you in the eye and say, on a night long ago in Iraq, I looked young American combat soldiers in the eye and said, follow me through an Iraqi minefield. I was all in then, and I'm all in now, and my name is Greg Ellison, and I have the gumption, the grit, and the guts to be your next United States Congressman. Thank you. I welcome your questions. I don't have all the answers, but I'll try.
Once again, thank you for coming this evening.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having me.
At this time, what do you believe are the three most important challenges that face the 3rd Congressional District?
Great question, Frank. Thank you. The first and foremost, as I alluded to, is we're in a recession here. Over 12,000 people have been thrown out of work here in South Louisiana. And so we need to take the steps. For example, there are hidden costs associated with cheap gasoline all across the United States. So a new congressman, and any congressman coming from the 3rd District, is going to be a freshman congressman. So it all boils down to leadership. But we need to be able to articulate the fact that we need a national energy policy that's coherent and sound, and the energy policy can't be to send young boys and girls over to Iraq like we've done the last 25 years. So number one, we need a sound, coherent energy policy. Number two, we need to make sure that the regulations that the federal government keeps trying to impose on the deep water drilling in the name of it's a political agenda, because last time I checked, solar and wind can't power an 18-wheeler down the highway. So we got to get that done. And three, the national debt is always a concern, because if we don't get the national debt under control, we won't know the same America that you and I grew up in.
Thank you. Obviously, you have a great deal of and extensive military training and many years of business experience. Why do you believe that combination of those experiences will make you an effective leader in Congress?
I would say probably the number one, besides being aware of all the problems, and I don't have all the solutions, but the significance is it's leadership. I tell people that my leadership skills were formed on the grounds at West Point. They were honed on the battlefield of Iraq and strengthened as a community leader here in Louisiana. So I think that's the most important thing. The other thing is I have the ability to go up and talk to people of all political parties and convince them, for example, that the greatest thing we need to keep Lafayette going and the rest of the congressional district going in Lafayette is the economic piston called the offshore oil business. And over in Lake Charles, we need to make sure that the port is properly dredged so that we can take advantage of the natural gas revolution, export revolution that's occurring over there. We got 60 to 80 billion dollars in construction projects. So you really have a tale of two cities going on right now. A vibrant economy, and ours is kind of slipping into recession that we need to get back.
Thank you. My next question is, do you know what percentage of the 3rd Congressional District consists of agricultural businesses and farms? And my question is, what federal programs will you promote or eliminate with reference to agricultural interest in the district, if you're elected?
Our agriculture is part and parcel to our culture and to our way of life. I was up in Washington, D.C. not long ago, and they asked me the question about exactly what you asked. And I looked at him, I said, you know, crawfish, for example, is much more than buying and selling a commodity. It's woven its way into our culture. On Good Friday, we celebrate with crawfish boils. And so the same thing with our rice and our sugar cane. So it's ingrained into us, you know, subsidies, and I think that's what your heart of your question is. Subsidies kind of is in tension with the free market society, but when it's ingrained so much like it is here in South Louisiana, we have to acknowledge that and look at that.
I take that to mean that you're going to promote the industry,
Yes.
the agricultural industry, and not unnecessarily eliminate any subsidies that are working.
Thank you for rephrasing, Frank.
It's always nice to question a colonel, you know. So, Lake Charles has seen a recent boom, you know, with the liquefied natural gas business. And are you in favor of construction of new construction pipelines to and from Lake Charles and Cameron?
Absolutely. You know, it's natural gas is going to, I talked to some Cheniere Energy folks the other day, which has a large natural gas facility. They anticipate buying up to 40% of the natural gas market in the United States in the out years. But it's going to, if governments can do anything to help to create and produce jobs, that's how they can do it. You know, one of the things that government has the responsibility, along with the Corps engineers, is dredging the Calcasieu Ship Channel. And that's an economic piston that'll be a bright, shiny light to creating jobs here in South Louisiana.
This is my last question. What is your level of commitment in promoting and maintaining an environmentally safe air and groundwater standards across the district? And specifically, does fracking pose an imminent threat to our environment?
Frank, I don't think anybody could argue against clean air and clean water. I mean, we all need to live on this planet. And I think in Genesis, God gave man dominion over the earth, and the implied covenant is to take care of our planet. So we can't spoil our planet, and you know, we need clean water and clean air. That's an easy one. What was the second part of the question?
Fracking.
Fracking. You know, in South Louisiana, we don't frack. North Louisiana fracks. South Louisiana doesn't have that problem. West Texas fracks. North Louisiana fracks. North Dakota fracks. But in our congressional district, we do not have fracking. You know.
Everyone knows that we encourage the questions from the audience. Would you, and please come up and ask that question. Here's an opportunity. It's an important position to be elected here shortly, in the month of November. We have Mr. Larry.
Thank you for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
Your push card here says you were a graduate of the Point. Well, we've recently elected a graduate of the Point, John B., the governor, and we're still watching him. He's taken some strong actions. I kind of support him on most of his bills, but he's kind of wandering astray on a few things. I think I'd like him. I've never met him, didn't vote for him, but he's got an interesting way of approaching things. Now, my brother was a colonel in training battalion for artillery, and he designed the missile guidance system on our missiles we used over in the sandbox over there. And but I was just old ground pounder, and I got to think, you're going to lead me through a minefield? I bet there's more to the story than that, because you know, mines are they're not fun to play with. Lots of you were right. You started out listing all the negative things in our country, and believe me, you didn't even start to touch the list. So,
I'd have been here all night.
yes, you would have. So I thank you for keeping it brief. We all know that there's problems in our country, and we're going to look for solutions for them. And I appreciate you coming tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Appreciate it.
Mr. Red Green has a question.
First of all, Colonel, I salute you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Got a little souvenir here for you. I hope you take this to Washington with you. It contains the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and a lot more information.
Thank you, Mr.
And on the back of it, you'll find at the bottom, it has a quotation from the Bible, 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name, if we can get that to Washington, I'd love to get that to some of the officials in Washington. I have 4 quick questions. Number 1, you a Republican or Democrat? I probably know the answer to that already, but
I'm a Republican.
figures, okay. Number 2, what is your opinion on term limits on the transgender situation? And the last one, sending troops into battle without a constitutional declared war, which we have not had since World War II. Thank you.
The first one on term limits is easy for me. I think the founding fathers intended that we have term limits, even though they didn't enumerate it or say it. They want citizen legislatures. The Congress met just infrequently. And probably the worst enemy that Washington, D.C. ever had, you know what it was? Was the air condition. You know, Washington is a swampy bottom, you know, it's hot and humid in the summer. And once they invented the air condition, the politicians started sitting in session 360, whatever it does, all year round. So blame the air condition. So I'm for term limits. I'd sign on to the term limits. Tell me again your other two questions.
The transgender situation.
Nation states crumble from within long before the enemies knock down the gates. And when a society, an empire, a nation start a moral decay, that's a slippery slope. The enemy comes and knocks down the gate. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous that if you can self-identify as you're born one sex, you can identify the other. And little boys going into the little girl's bathroom is totally unacceptable in my way of thinking.
And the last one was sending troops to die in a battle without being a declared constitutional war.
But the Congress of the United States has the constitutional responsibility, along with the President, to declare war. And the Army is made up of people that come from the citizenry, and that the Army, our people need to stand up and send a message to their elected politicians that says, hey, we need you to make a declaration of war because we want to send our young men and women there, and it's got to be within the vital interest of the United States. I'll never, having been to combat, I'll never vote for war unless it's in the vital interest of the United States of America. Too often, what we have happen is there is a lack of a clear policy. And for example, we've been in Afghanistan for 13 years, and I'd ask you, Mr. Green, what is our strategic intent in Afghanistan?
I haven't been able to figure it out.
Okay, so me either. So we need a clear military, a clear political policy, and then you orchestrate the military conditions on the ground to achieve that.
Sickle.
Mr. Ed, come on.
I just want your general opinions on 3 quick topics. Number 1, how do you feel about Obama's Affordable Care Act, and how would you react if you get to be in Congress? Number 2, what do you feel about Donald Trump? And number 3, if you get in, what kind of general national education policy would you want to foster, would want to put in place? Thank you.
Obamacare, it's not affordable. You will see your premiums go up here, and some studies I've read that they're in probably in 5-10 years from now there'll be less people insured than were insured before Obamacare. You have doctors now moving to their own boutique practices, because they don't want to do either Medicare or Medicaid, which is always difficult. So I don't have the entire answer there. I think health savings account but you're certainly, the premium's going to go up, and we don't have all the young people signing up. It's not my program, so I'm not having the young people sign up. But we need to look to alternatives for that. Mr. Trump, the alternative is Hillary Clinton, and the fact that if she's the main litmus test for me is the ability to nominate Supreme Court justices, since they have such an impact upon the world we live here in America. And at least Mr. Trump has put forth a list, if he sticks to it, of conservative judges that he would appoint. So that one. What was the last question?
Educational policy, national education.
The world is no longer round. It is flat. We're in a global economy. When the Cold War ended, during the Cold War, we were a divided system. So when the Iron Curtain fell in 1989, and the forces of free market capitalism. If you look at it, very few countries, I think 8% of all the societies on earth were free market capitalists in 1975. So we need to move in the direction of strong educational systems, science, technology, engineering, and math, because if we're going to compete on a global basis, that's how we're going to compete. So we need to push towards that direction. So we need to have high standards. And I'll give you an example. I used to take my kids around. We used to go take them out to eat, and I'd see the waitress, and I'd say, "Okay, what are you studying?" And I'll make a joke now, either bird watching or basket weaving. So today you go in, you get a degree, psychology. You get $50,000 worth in debt, and you get out and you start looking for a job. You have a great deal of difficulty finding a job that allows you to repay that $50,000, so you ended up back living at home with mom and dad. We're becoming a much more technological, evolutionary, excuse me. So we need to put emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Mr. Tom Andrews?
Greg, your point about the national debt is well taken. Do you have any specifics on what we should do? I've been hearing figures that we're borrowing 40% of what we're taking in, and it's an unsustainable course. I don't know why Washington doesn't listen. If it's unsustainable, we're going to get to the crisis and then deal with it. That just won't work. So do you have any particular specifics? Should we cut 40% in 1 year, a third of that in 3 years, or any specifics on how to deal with the national debt?
Okay. Thanks, Tom, that's a great question. Americans are not typically good at projecting out in the future and identifying a threat on the horizon. You know, we had Pearl Harbor, we had different events, Korean War, that you could have seen coming as we atrophied in our approach to guns versus better. In 1950 we started, 1945 we started shrinking the military, so much so that, and you see the parallel coming today, as you shrink the military and you lack the will to deter war. I'm not saying employ the forces. Then you see the other, like the Russians flying into Aleppo, you see the Chinese building their islands out. So to answer your question, we're not good at taking the vaccine, up front when it comes to the national debt. And political parties, both of them, the Republicans and the Democrats, all the career politicians have avoided, of which all you got to do is the math. In 2026, just 10 years from now, well, let me start out. Right now in 2016, you have national outlays, mandatory spending of $2.1 trillion. In 2026, it's projected to be $4.2 trillion, and the deficit is at $1.36 trillion in 2026. So you're reaching a point where there will be no money for discretionary spending in 2026, no money for roads, no money for bridges, no money for the military. And at that point, assuming that the interest rates stay the same and you don't have an increase in interest rates, your national interest on the debt, anybody want to make a guess what the interest on the debt will be in 2026? It'll be second only to Social Security. It'll be $832 billion a year. Currently it's $232 billion a year. So you're going to have an exponential. Okay, so what does that mean? When the government has to go in and secure $832 billion, they have to go into the marketplace and they have to compete with small businesses. Small businesses create 2/3 of the jobs in this world, in this country. So when the government's competing with a small businessman who's taking the risk that pays the taxes, the amount of money he pays in interest will go up significantly. And so you'll have a slowdown in the entire economy. So Tom, to answer your question, you have 77 federal welfare programs, and we have to get people into the mindset that they need to work, that work adds meaning to your life. And so you need to do that over 10 years. You can't go out tomorrow and make a 40% reduction. You'd have a significant problem in our society if you did something like that.
AJ, come on up.
On a more local level, I wonder if Lieutenant Colonel Greg Ellison would round out a picture that I have, a rumor about leadership here in Lafayette, that he not only on the field of battle during the Iraq War has taken on a role in an unsolicited position I've seen and I've heard. I wonder if he'd confirm this rumor of being a leader in the community of some of the greatest swimmers, I'm told, to my great surprise, at Reds, where they look to him as a coach, a leader, completely unsolicited, or am I just imagining? And is that too personal? On the local level, I was wondering if you actually have occupied such a role.
AJ, that's the best question all night. Thank you. I am, hey, thank you. That wasn't the best question. You see, I'm not a politician. I've never been in politics ever before in my life. You know, I'm just a regular old Joe. I swam at Lafayette High School. I actually compete on the master's level occasionally. I think 3 times we swam the Pensacola Bay. But my real love is I'll go over to Reds, and that's how I got to meet AJ. He was swimming in the pool one day, and I said, AJ, come on, I'm going to show you how to do your stroke better. So I didn't know AJ from Adam, you know, but that's just the type of guy I am. Always trying to help everybody in a sport I love. Thank you, AJ. And I didn't pay AJ to answer that question.
Mr. Tom, come on up here.
I'm sure you've been following the situation in South China Sea with China. As a military man, you know, as a citizen, it concerns me greatly, you know, that we've been capitalizing a communist nation, and it's so much deja vu like the Japanese. You know, we sold them iron ore and they came back at it, and now they're buzzing on our planes and everything else. Do you have any thoughts on what we should do militarily and in general foreign affairs? I make a point frequently, I don't think the United States of America should be doing business with the totalitarian government, you know, borrowing money from the totalitarian government, holding securities for the United States. But what do you think we should do with the Chinese situation, the buzzing and their attempts to dominate the South China Sea?
When I'm a commissioned officer on the plane at West Point, I take basically 2 oaths. The first one is to the Constitution of the United States, and the second one is to obey the orders of the officers appointed over me, to include the President of the United States. So, to answer your question, it all flows from the President of the United States, who is duly elected by the people of the United States. So it's he sets the temperament, he sets the agenda, he sets the military strategy. So the military just can't go out and start buzzing the Chinese back. But to answer your question in a much a global perspective, as soon as the 2 things that we've done in our recent history, one is which we drew a red line in the sand in Syria. Once the line was crossed and we did nothing about it, whether that was the right line to draw or not draw, basically that's not the question. But once you draw a red line and you don't support your position, then the rest of the world sees it and they move into a vacuum. And that's what they did in the Ukraine, in the Crimea, in the South China Sea. That's when the Russians flew into Aleppo. And the world actually becomes a less safe place. So anytime, a classic example of all that is at the end of World War II, we were going to rely totally on the atomic bomb. So anytime any little dictator crossed the line, we were going to nuke them. Well, the North Koreans crossed the line, and June of 1950, we didn't nuke them. So you have to maintain strength, and by maintaining strength, you deter evil. And there is evil out in the world. You know, for somebody to say that there's not evil and there's not good, there are evil people out there.
If there's another question out there, we'd certainly like you guys to come up. We'd like to make the program closer to an hour if at all possible.
Has he got a slogan for his platform? Some
Sure,
type
it's a
of
good-
slogan?
Strong conservative.
Give him a chance to close, Carol.
Repeat that for the mic, would you, Carol? Would you repeat that for the mic so that Ed can have that, the strong slogan?
Mr. Green asked me if I had a slogan. I said, I'm a strong conservative. I want to stand up and do what's right for America. I want to restore America. I want to reclaim the America that you and I grew up in, so that our children have an opportunity to live the American dream that we had the opportunity to secure and pursue.
Thank you, Greg. Well, at this point, we'll run on a couple of other items that are coming up, but I would like for you to have maybe get a summation. If you'd like to come up and give us a closing statement.
This election is about leadership. Anyone you elect is going to be a freshman congressman. So they're going to go up there and have to have the leadership skills necessary to do what is right for America, to do what is right for South Louisiana, to be the voice when we stand up and make horrible deals with Iran, which is an evil culture, giving them the pathway to the bomb, and also, for example, putting 1 million barrels of oil on the market. Iran is destabilizing the Middle East. So I'm going to go up there. I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to go up there and I'm going to work every day, use the leadership skills that I honed on the battlefields of Iraq that were first formed on the fields of West Point, and strengthen right here in South Louisiana, because our country is too great not to fight for. I'm the same young man that raised my hand on the plane at West Point over 40 years ago. I felt compelled to defend our country then. I felt compelled to defend our country now. I'm a grandfather. You know, I could ride off into the sunset like many of you and not have to worry about anything. But I think it's incumbent upon us and our generation to get up and get off the sidelines so that we hand off to our children and grandchildren an America greater than the one we inherited.
Tell them when the election is.
The election is November 8th. The same day as the presidential election.
Thank you.
We have our next speaker. It will be your competition, but we haven't met this gentleman either. That's Gus Rance. He's running for the third district, congressional district here, the same as Greg is. So would you mark your calendars and please do that? We'd appreciate it. We have a gentleman in the audience here that's, as a matter of fact, he's an officer of our Concerned Citizen Group. Mike they've been working diligently about I-49 connector, and there's been a lot of people have come. Mike has been supportive of that. He serves on one of the committees. So Mike, if there was something that you wanted to maybe offer individuals that may want to have a small sign or whatever, I'd ask him to come and talk to you afterwards if y'all would do that. Mike has been very, very, diligent about getting the information out. Feels very strong about that water and air situation, and we all are. So hopefully that information can get to the right people and you can make your own decisions. If there's not any other questions, the meeting stands adjourned. We appreciate everyone coming here this evening, especially our guest speaker. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.